Well, our speaker today is exciting. The one that we had scheduled for today canceled. Fortunately, we have a good replacement, and I'm looking at the little bio here. 4 years in the Navy, from 59 to 63. He served on a destroyer in the South Pacific. He was a Planes of Fame volunteer. He's a great guy. He's sitting back there right now. Let's give a nice introduction to Mike Madsen. Up here, Mark.
I've never used this before. Can you hear me?
Wait.
Make a picture. Okay, got it. As I walk up to the podium and slowly open my book, I'm reminded of a little skit on Laugh-In. If anybody remembers a Laugh-In TV show from the 1970s. Artie Johnson was wearing a black suit with a white collar turned around.
Quiet!
He approached the podium with his black book, which he opened very reverently and slowly, looked out at the audience, and he said, "Under the eye, 29, 29, under the eye." It may be referring to quite a few bingo sessions, do you think? But you're probably wondering why I called you here. Oh, wait a minute, that's a different speech. I haven't got this memorized, so you have to bear with me if I read to you once in a while. But Vince gave me a call on Saturday. I was kind of a standby speaker and asked me if I'd put something together. So over the weekend, I threw something together and hope it works. I went in the service during that all too short period between wars. It was between Korea and Vietnam. I don't have any war stories to tell, but I do have a few sea stories. And if anybody that's been in the Navy knows that the sea stories usually involve a lot of BS. But I'll try to stick to the truth. Vince asked me to, I'll talk about myself because I was asked to talk about myself. And then about my destroyer, which is up on the table there. It's a Fletcher class destroyer. The only difference between that one in the picture and the one I was on is the hull number. So it's, if you want to take a look at it, that's what she looked like. Well, going back with me, just briefly, my remembrance of World War II was very limited. I remember the blackouts in St. Cloud. And I was wondering why my mother was going around shutting off all the lights way before it was time to go to bed. And years later, I got to thinking, why would the Germans bomb St. Cloud? And it turned out they didn't, and I think it was because of all the Germans living in St. Cloud. My era was the Cold War era. I just have a couple of thoughts about the Cold War. You all remember the Cold War. I'm sure it lasted for quite a while. And it was kind of shaky at times. If you remember Nikita Khrushchev banging his shoe on the desk at the UN. But one of the things that sticks in my mind is Nixon's visit to China. After many years of living with the Cold War and all the threats and everything involved, here we have an American president landing in China in Beijing, getting off the plane, and here's the Chinese Army band playing the Star-Spangled Banner. Never thought I'd live to see that. And of course, the other part of the Cold War was the Berlin Wall coming down. That was something that was hard to believe. It was up for so many years, and all the bad things that happened between East and West Germany. I enlisted at age 19, 1959. I signed up in, I think it was April or May, and they had this program where it was delayed, your entrance was delayed if you want to spend the summer at home. So anyway, I spent the summer at home and went in September, or enlisted, or took the oath in September. But the recruiter asked me, he says, where do you want to go for boot camp? San Diego or Great Lakes. Well, it was September, and you know the weather, how the weather goes in Great Lakes and Minnesota, area around there. So I said, take a guess. So I asked for San Diego, and that's where I went. Spent 9 weeks there. Weather was nice, beautiful. San Diego was beautiful. I had a lot of fun, and then when my 9 weeks were up, I took a short walk about 2 or 3 blocks over to my next duty station, which was the Electrician's A School in San Diego, which was 13 weeks long. And I got to admit, I was really impressed with military schools. How extensive they were, the labs that they had set up. We had distribution switchboards set up with generators, just simulating the ones. In fact, they were the switchboards were the exact same ones that we had aboard ship. Although the generators were different, we had steam turbines. When I got out of EMA school, wherever I went in the Navy, I rode on a ship. I watched other people fly from place to place. I rode a ship all the time. So I caught a destroyer, USS O'Brien. Took me from Long Beach to Pearl Harbor. And all along the way, we played cat and mouse with some submarines. We were zigzagging for about, it seemed like 2 weeks before we got to Pearl. Took longer than I thought it would. But it was, I was introduced to the sea, to the ocean, riding it on a destroyer. Had my first bout with seasickness, which lasted a day, and then I never got sick after that for the remainder of the 4 years. We pulled into Pearl and tied up next to the ship I was going to be on, USS Sproston. And I took one look at it and thought, what am I doing here? The ship was being repainted, which is a never-ending job of the Navy. It's a constant fight with salt water. Anyway, it was big patches of red lead where they hadn't covered it with gray paint yet. And I thought, boy, this is something. But I went aboard, and one thing on the Sproston when I was looking at it and the shape it was in, you got to remember, think of flying a 1943 B-17 or B-24, flying it in 1960 through 1963. A lot of maintenance, and maybe a few ghosts. But I went aboard ship. I was an EMFA, Electrician's Mate Fireman Apprentice. I had two chevrons or hash marks on my sleeve. I suppose I was the equivalent of a buck private or something in the Army or the Air Force. I went down to the electric shop and to be introduced to the crew, the electrician, all the electricians aboard ship. And I was an EMFA amongst crows. And what I mean by that, all the other guys had crows on their shoulders. They were petty officers, 3rd class, 2nd class. I think we might have had a 1st class also. So here I was, the only private, you might say, amongst sergeants. So guess who got all the dirty details? I had mess duty, first of all, working the scullery and the mess decks for 3 or 4 weeks, and did all the things that were required of a new crewman. And the chief petty officer that we had at the time called me number 1. Whenever he needed something done, he'd say, "Number 1, come here." And number 1 meant that I was the number 1 striker aboard in his group, the number 1, because I was the only one that was a striker. The rest were all petty officers. But some of the responsibilities that we had as electricians on the destroyer were operating the switchboards when we were underway on sea, the power distribution switchboards, which were fed by steam turbine generators that we were responsible for maintaining, 250 kilowatt steam generators, steam turbines. And then we had an emergency generator. I think it was 100 kW diesel. One time I was standing watch on that switchboard because we were, what had happened, we were in port, tied up, and the main plant was shut down, and we had run shore power to the ship. This was in Japan. The yard birds lost the load. The ship went dead. And there's nothing more spooky than a ship dead in the water, no noise, none of the customary sounds of the vent fans, all the electrical things that are running aboard the ship. And you could almost hear the water lapping up against the side of the ship. And of course, pitch dark. So anyway, we got the diesel lit off. And I went down there, standing next to the diesel, watching the switchboard. Under full load, she was snorting, grunting, and blew a piston. And started vibrating. It was only, I think, a 3-cylinder to begin with. And it started vibrating, and insulation drifting down from the overhead. And it was like December in Minnesota in a snowstorm. But anyway, that was the third generator that we had aboard ship. Then we were responsible for lighting and ventilation, and the boats. The boats had, we had 2 boats, Captain's Gig and another whaleboat that had engines and batteries that we were responsible for. And I mentioned shore power. When we pull into port and shut down the main plant, we'd have to run shore power, which was a cable about that big round, hooked up to a connecting box in the midship's passageway, and then throw the switch when it was the appropriate time, and go on shore power. A little bit of the history of the Sproston. She was launched in 1943, decommissioned in 1946, recommissioned in 1950, and then decommissioned in 1969. She's probably now razor blades. Her record in World War II, shot down 10 aircraft, sank one sub with depth charges, sank another sub, a midget sub, this was unconfirmed, sank her with gunfire after she fired a torpedo at the Sproston. The Sproston maneuvered to avoid it. They watched it go alongside the ship. If any of you have ever heard of a Japanese long lance torpedo, it's something that you don't want to be hit with when you're on a ship or a mortar. I'm going to give you a few, this might be kind of dry, but I'm going to try not to make it dry. I've made conversions to these specifications so you can compare it maybe to bombers or something, in some instances. Anyway, the length of her length was 376 feet. Her width, or in the Navy we call it the beam, was 39 feet. She weighed 4,200,000 pounds, but really that's 2,100 tons. Fuel, 492 tons. I don't know how many gallons any place to, so it's hard to compare that with a bomber. But range was 6,000 to 8,000 miles. Speed, 45 miles an hour, which is 37 knots. Altitude, most of the time we flew at sea level. Unless we're in a typhoon, we might go up 6 feet, 5, 6 feet. Machinery. Excuse me, we had 4 boilers that operated at 465 pounds per square inch pressure at 850 degrees superheat. Superheat is like turbos on a B-17 or superchargers. Mostly turbos on aircraft like this. They gave you extra power when needed. When you turned up the superheat, you used more fuel, but you got more speed. We had a twin engine craft, 30,000 horsepower per engine. Armament, We had a nose turret and tail turret, believe it or not, but they were 5-inch guns. They could fire, they could go out about 10 miles. Used as anti-aircraft guns, they go up to about 37,000 feet. We had waist guns, twin 3-inch, port and starboard. Bomb load. We had 10 340-pound depth charges in the racks on the stern. We had 4 2,200-pound 21-inch torpedoes. The torpedoes were midships mounted in the superstructure. They weren't trainable like on a lot of big destroyers. 4 tubes, 2 tubes per side. We had 6 18-inch homing torpedoes mounted on the old one, the next one above the main deck. And they were triple mounts, triple mount on each side. We had a 13-inch ASW rocket launcher. It was kind of a turret-shaped device. It was trainable, and it was guided by fire control and sonar equipment. Got a little story about that. This 13-inch rocket that it fired, you can imagine what it would do to a submarine. We, of course, we fired dummy projectiles when we were in training. We were playing cat and mouse with the subs. One time we were out on an exercise doing just that, and we had an umpire aboard, and they got an umpire aboard the sub. And our job was to locate the sub and fire the missile and hit it. Well, they picked up the sub on sonar. They were evading. We stayed with them and got all the inputs into the ASW, the Mark 108 they call it, and they fired the projectile. Well, talking to the sub, they said we missed, and we claimed that we hit it. So the sub surfaced alongside of us. The umpire came out of the hatch in the conning tower, or the sail, whatever they call it, and there was the projectile rattling around inside the conning tower. I guess we got that one. On that subject, I've talked to some submariners about homing torpedoes. The ones we had were practice torpedoes that had a rubber nose on them. And when fired at a sub, if they made contact, of course it would explode, but they would hit the side of the sub, bounce back, and hit again, keep hitting and bouncing until the batteries went dead, and then it would automatically surface. But this submariner said one of the scariest sounds in the world was the sound of that torpedo biting against the side of the sub. Oh, one other thing, I got one other story that I skipped over about. I was talking about boilers, the superheated boilers. The steam going through these steam lines at 850 degrees and 565 pounds pressure is pretty dangerous in the wrong circumstances, like combat or loose fitting. And sometimes they would get maybe a hairline crack on a steam line, and you could hear it hissing. It was actually a high-pitched whistle. And the boilermen, we call them BTs, boiler tenders, the BTs would search for these leaks, because they had to be fixed. And how they would find it, they would run a broom along the steam line. And when the broom caught fire, that's where the steam leak was. I didn't know steam could start a fire, but I guess under those conditions it can. I think they learned to use the broom after one crewman, I don't know what ship it was on or when it happened, lost 3 or 4 fingers because that high pressure steam just cut them off like a knife, a saw. So that was kind of a unique way of fixing steam leak problem. Again, back the destroyer, the mission that we had was like 4 or 5 different things we were responsible for, like ASW, which was our main mission, which we were constantly practicing. Shore bombardment, that was fun. Every time after we got done with shore bombardment, I as an electrician had to go around and replace all the broken light fixtures. We also had a rescue as our mission. We were playing guard for carriers, pulling guys out of the drain. And we were to provide anti-aircraft protection for the carrier. Also, we were anti-surface vessel protection. The armament that we had, of course, was by today's standards was kind of primitive. At the time, though, we thought it was pretty slick. The 3-inch 50s could put out quite a bit of lead. But tracking a jet with the fire control equipment that we had was pretty difficult. Some of the ports of call that we made during our cruises, I went on 2 cruises when I was aboard to the Western Pacific, Westpac cruises we call them. We went to Formosa, Japan, Hong Kong, Philippines, Midway Island, and in Japan, there were 4 or 5 different ports that we went to. On the first cruise that I went on, while we were in the area, the Quemoy and Matsu problem was going on, if you remember that. The Chinese were shelling these Taiwanese islands, and so our job was to sail down the strait between China and Taiwan and prevent them from just stopping the artillery barrages. So I guess lucky for us, they did. They quit doing it, so we kept going back up and down the straits for a few weeks. And left the area and went on to Hong Kong and some of the other ports. The big mistake I made on the first cruise, I saw all these places through the bottom of a beer mug. I hit the bars, and I thought to myself after the cruise, I could have done that in Pearl Harbor, hit the bars, and look at all. And I thought of all the stuff that I missed. So on the second cruise, I made a point to take a lot of tours, and yeah, tours are cut and dried. But you're seeing a lot of things, and you're having somebody tell you what all these things mean and what they are. So I learned a lot, got to see a lot of interesting things. During that second cruise, excuse me a minute, right now. During that second cruise, the Cuban Missile Crisis started. And we were in the area around Japan when it started. The crew didn't know, we weren't getting any information from the old man. Either he wasn't getting any information or he wasn't sharing it with us. So the guys, we'd all seemed to have shortwave radios they bought in ports. We'd go up on the 01 level and listen to our shortwave radios to try to get some news of what was going on, because we had no idea how close to war we were. And so we turned on our shortwave radios, and it was amazing how clear Radio Moscow came on the radios. And the guy on Radio Moscow spoke better English than we do. But of course we got kind of slanted news from them. But I was standing, my watches were on the switchboards, forward engine room, after engine room, below sea level. And I was often sit there by the bulkhead, which was about 3/4 inch steel, wondering how long it would take a torpedo to go through that bulkhead. Because we didn't know if we were at war, if we were not at war, if there were subs in the area. But I didn't dwell on it. Then I found out later, in fact much later, about 2 or 3 years ago, that our mission there during that was, what was it, a week, 2 weeks? We were sitting off Vladivostok, major Russian naval base. And our job was to radio the message that the Russian subs were coming out in force. And if that had happened, I think we would have lasted maybe an hour. It was just us, one ship. I guess for lack of a better term, we were just a decoy. But another thing that happened during the second cruise, we had an SOS call from a Liberian tanker that had an explosion in one of the engine rooms. And one of the crewmen had been burned by hot fuel oil, sprayed. It was spraying all over the place. And so we went out at flank speed to get him. I guess it was beyond helicopter range, that's why they sent us out there. And the crew had already abandoned ship, and we were picking the ones that were in lifeboats. We were picking them up in our whaleboat, and we took the burned crewmen into the wardroom. And I had just gotten off watch. It was about, I don't know, midnight. Got in my rack, and I was going to sleep, kind of tired. All of a sudden, somebody was shaking me, get out of bed. And I said, well, I just got done with my watch. He said, no, they need you up in the wardroom. And I thought, well, what have I done now? But anyway, I went out there, and I found out this guy was, this injured man was a German from Heidelberg, and it wasn't uncommon to have a multinational crew on some of these ships. Anyway, they got me up there because I guess I told somebody, one of my buddies, that I had some German in high school. So I was using my best high school German, communicating with this guy. I suppose you'd call it third-degree burns or worse. I don't know if he survived, but he was alive when he left the ship. We brought him back into Subic Bay, the Philippines, and the ambulance came and got him. I never heard after that if he survived or not. But, I think he was mainly in shock, otherwise he would have been screaming his head off because he was in bad shape. In Pearl, when I first reported aboard, we had some casualties aboard ship. For a while there, it seemed like they almost had the meat wagon waiting for us when we got back into port. It was a rash of, the first one was a machinist mate who got electrocuted down the engine room. The engine room on a destroyer is electrically a bad place to be. Metal, everything's metal, the deck, the overhead, bulkheads, all the controls, and it's humid, and there might be a lot of salt water that bilges, which kind of drifts up through the deck plates. Anyway, he was using an electric wire brush down in the lower level of the engine room, and got electrocuted, knocked him down. He was laying on the deck, and the wire brush was still running, making a nice groove in his chest. Anyway, he was dead, but we tried to revive him. The pharmacist mate, who was a Marine, which isn't uncommon. Marines board ship is pharmacist mates. We went down and started getting him oxygen, and we used up every oxygen tank on the ship. In fact, as we were using the last tank, the rigor mortis had said, I don't know why we kept trying, but anyway, we brought it back in, and they came and took him away. It was sad. They left a wife and kids and everything in a stupid accident like that. We immediately checked all the power tools. In those days, they didn't have plastic housings on power tools. It was all metal housings. And sweating hands, metal housings. But we checked all the tools. They all checked out. We put a measure on them and checked the resistance of the insulation and everything checked out right. After that, we made sure that those tools were checked legally, and everybody had to use rubber gloves when they were using them. We had another incident where a sonar man was electrocuted. I just had lunch with him aboard ship, and an hour later he was dead. He was working on a sonar transducer, and they have interlocks on the doors. They open the doors, supposed to shut down everything. The interlock didn't work. We got across some ultra-high voltage, knocked it down. Pharmacist named it down with, he gave him, I believe, CPR, got him breathing again, and then he choked on his lunch. And he couldn't keep him alive. The guy just choked to death, and that was ironic. And the hospital, the corpsman, really took it bad. We had another incident, kind of a freak incident. We had a couple of BTs, boiler tenders, that just gotten off watch in the boiler rooms, 120 degrees. We were operating in the tropics. When you come out watch, the first thing you want to do is get some air, cool off. And they were sitting on this bollard or bit on the main deck by the lifeline, cooling off. One guy was quite heavy, about 250 pounds, and then a young kid, about 18 years old, was happy to be with him on his watch. They were both sitting there anyway. We had some ground swells, and the ship was just kind of slowly going through these ground swells, nothing really violent. And then the ship just kind of took a slow roll, and they both lost their balance, went back, hit the wire, and it parted, and they went over the side. The watch on the old back aft immediately called the bridge, said we had a man overboard. We turned the ship around, which takes, we weren't going that fast, but it still takes a while. Went back, and we found the big guy, Ozzy his name was, and face down in the water. They were both face down in the water. We got Ozzy out, and then the other one disappeared. He was later picked up by some crash boats out of City Bay. But we got Ozzy aboard, and of course he was dead. We put him on the stretcher and put him in the reefer until we got back to control. These stretchers were wire mesh with straps. They covered him with a shroud, strapped him in the stretcher, and stood him up in the back of the reefer behind the milk cartons, I think. Anyway, we had the Filipino stewards aboard ship like to raid our reefer for ice cream or whatever we were looking for. Needless to say, being very superstitious people, they never went in there while Ozzy was there. But again, I imagine the captain had a lot of paperwork to do with all of these just unfortunate things, accidents. There's an age-old argument about men and machines. Some think they're nothing but metal appliances. Others think they almost have a soul or personality. I guess it all goes back to the cowboy and his horse. The destroyer, I'd cuss it when it gave me trouble. Like I said, high maintenance. It was 20 years old when I was aboard. It was like 26 years old when they finally scrapped it. But I'd feel better when it took me to some exotic South Pacific port. After all, it was my home. After I served on the destroyer, it was time to leave, time to go back to the States to be discharged. I got aboard the Kitty Hawk again. There I go aboard the ship again. I don't know, it took me 10 days to get back. And my first time on a carrier underway, after being on a destroyer, where sometimes you're walking with one foot on the deck and one foot on the bulkhead because the ship is going like this. On a carrier, you don't even know you're underway. You don't even know they're out at sea sometimes. They're so big. But I was discharged in San Diego, came back to Wilmer, Minnesota, went back to trade school, went to work for AT&T in Fargo, then came back down here and found out about planes of fame, worked there for about 12 years. Had an affair with a Corsair, but that's another story. If I may address the part of our group that we call the greatest generation, the word heroes. Some people are uncomfortable with the title and they get tired of hearing it. But please allow me to use it because you were the kids that became men almost overnight. Defending freedom in an aluminum tube at 30,000 feet, 45 below zero, while getting shot at. To this 10-year-old kid going to his Friday night movie, they were heroes on the screen, but you were the real heroes at 12 o'clock high. Thanks for what you did, and thanks for the privilege of addressing you. Any questions?
How many aboard?
About 250. Wartime, about 350.
Did you ever hit any rogue waves or heavy storms?
Yeah, quite a few. We didn't go through a typhoon, but we caught the edge of a typhoon. I don't know what's worse. They say that the eye of the typhoon is kind of calm. But the ship, like as I said, was rolling so much that they finally wouldn't let us walk the main deck. We had to go up on the old one level, which is the next deck up. And that we could go 4.5 that way on the old one level. But there was a saying, destroyers were notorious for rolling. And they said a destroyer would roll on wet grass. That's probably true.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And the means how safely, from the deck down.
Good one. They call that the draft. Yeah. And I think on the destroyer it was 16 feet. Yeah. They have very little freeboard. The freeboard is from the main deck to the water. And I know that because I got thrown overboard one time. Yeah. When they got promoted, the ritual was to throw the guy overboard. And this was in Pearl Harbor. And Pearl Harbor isn't too clean. Yeah, I remember that. Okay.